When did you realize you weren't a priority? I never went into relationships trying to be someone's center of gravity. Maybe that sounds strange, but it's the truth. I never needed to be the most important thing in someone's life. I didn't expect to come before their family, their goals, or their sense of self. I just believed that if two people cared about each other, they would make room. Not constantly, not obsessively, just enough to show that the connection mattered. For a long time, that belief worked. I had my own routine, my own ambitions, my own problems to handle. I wasn't waiting by my phone. I wasn't counting hours or measuring effort. I treated relationships as something meaningful, but not something that should cost me my dignity or my balance. That's probably why it took me so long to notice what was happening. At first, it looked harmless. Plans that got postponed. Messages answered later than usual. Conversations that used to stretch late into the night ending early with, "I'm tired," or "we'll talk tomorrow." I didn't read into it. People get busy. Life shifts. I understood that. So I adjusted. I stopped suggesting last-minute plans. I didn't double text. I gave space without being asked for it. I focused more on my work, my gym routine, my friends. I told myself that this was what emotional maturity looked like, two independent people choosing each other when they could. But over time, something became clear. I was always fitting myself around her life. She was never fitting herself into mine. If she had free time, great, I might hear from her. If not, days could pass. When I brought it up gently, I was met with reassurance instead of change. I was told everything was fine, that she cared, that nothing was wrong. And technically, she wasn't lying. She did care, just not enough to rearrange anything. The moment that really settled it for me wasn't dramatic. No argument, no betrayal, no big confrontation. I remember checking my calendar one evening and realizing that every plan we'd had recently had only happened if it didn't interfere with something else she wanted more. Friends, events, spontaneous ideas, even doing nothing at all. And I thought to myself, if I stopped reaching out tomorrow, how long would it take for her to notice? That question scared me more than the answer. So I stopped, not to test her, not to manipulate the situation. I just matched the energy. I responded, but didn't initiate. I stayed kind, but I didn't chase. I kept living my life the way I always had. Days passed, then more days. Eventually, the silence became familiar. That's when I realized something important about myself. I don't need to be someone's top priority, but I won't accept being an afterthought. If someone can't find time for me, I don't fight for scraps of attention. I don't beg for presents. I don't convince people to care. I simply stop making time for them. Because I am my priority. I take care of my mental health, my goals, my peace. The people in my life are meant to add something: warmth, connection, growth. They're not supposed to drain me or make me question my worth. Losing that relationship didn't break me. What would have broken me is staying, slowly shrinking, quietly waiting, pretending that being optional felt enough. Sometimes the moment you realize you're not a priority isn't loud. It's calm, clear, and final. And that's the moment you choose yourself, not out of bitterness, but out of respect. Honestly, I never spent much time thinking about it, not in the way most people do. I never expected someone to be everything to me, and I never wanted to be everything to one person either. That kind of pressure always felt unrealistic. Life is bigger than one relationship, and people don't exist in emotional bubbles. I've always had a full circle around me. Friends I've known for years, family I stay close to, co-workers who turned into real connections, hobbies that pull me out of my head. So the way I saw it was simple. If I'm somewhere in the top 5 or 10 priorities of 5 or 10 different people, that's already a lot of connection, a lot of shared time, a lot of life. That perspective worked well for me, until it didn't. Not because people stopped caring, but because I started noticing how they cared. There's a difference between not being the main priority and being the one who only exists when it's convenient. I didn't need to come first. I just didn't want to come last. At first, I brushed it off. Everyone grows up. People move in with their partners, start building families, take on responsibilities. Of course, their priorities shift. That's normal. That's adulthood. I never took it personally when friends chose their partners or family over hanging out with me. I expected that. But then there were moments that didn't fit that explanation. Messages that went unanswered for days. Not because they were busy, but because they forgot. Invitations that never came unless I initiated first. Catching up only when someone needed advice, distraction, or emotional support, and then disappearing again once they felt better. That's when it hit me. I wasn't upset that I wasn't number one. I was exhausted from being optional. I noticed that if I didn't reach out, nothing happened. No checking in. No, "Hey, how are you?" No effort to maintain the connection. It wasn't hostile, just indifferent. And that kind of indifference is sneaky. It doesn't hurt all at once. It wears you down quietly. You start questioning whether you're asking for too much when you're really just asking for reciprocity. The turning point wasn't dramatic. One evening, I declined an invitation I'd normally jump at because I realized I was always bending my schedule for people who never did the same for me. And no one noticed. No one asked why. No one followed up. That told me everything. I didn't cut anyone off in anger. I didn't make speeches or set ultimatums. I just adjusted. I stopped over-investing. I stopped chasing availability. I stopped explaining my absence. And something surprising happened. My life didn't get smaller. It got quieter, calmer, more intentional. I still believe it's normal and healthy for people to put their partners and families first. That's not the issue. The issue is when you're only valued in theory, not in action. When you're spoken about warmly but treated passively. Being an adult means understanding priorities change. But it also means recognizing when your place in someone's life has quietly disappeared. Now, I measure things differently. I don't ask where I rank. I watch who shows up without being reminded. Who makes time without needing a reason. Who treats connection as mutual, not situational. I don't need to be everything to anyone. But I've learned this the hard way. If you're never chosen, eventually you have to choose yourself. For a long time, I thought the answer was simple. Be useful, be kind, be reliable, and people would choose you. So that's what I did. For years, I tried to be the best friend to everyone around me. I was the one who showed up, the one who listened, the one who remembered birthdays, checked in after bad days, stayed late to talk things through, helped move apartments, answered late-night calls. I thought that if I kept doing that, eventually I'd matter enough to someone to be chosen without hesitation. It didn't work. It's not that people disliked me. Quite the opposite. I know people think well of me. I know there are people who care about me, maybe even love me, in their own way. But when it came down to it, when time, energy, and presence actually mattered, I was never the priority. I was the reliable option, the safe option, the he'll understand option. And for a long time, I did understand. I told myself that adulthood is complicated, that people are busy, that priorities shift, that expecting too much would make me selfish. But after a while, a pattern became impossible to ignore. I was always the one adjusting, always the one waiting, always the one being postponed. Plans happened around me, not with me. Conversations only went deep when someone needed something. I was included emotionally, but rarely centrally. Appreciated, but not chosen. And the worst part was how quiet it all was. No betrayal, no drama, no moment where I could point and say, this is when it broke. Just the slow realization that no matter how good a friend I tried to be, I wasn't anyone's first call, or second, or even third. That messes with you. It makes you ask uncomfortable questions. Am I boring? Am I too available? Am I just easy to overlook? For a while, it hurt more than I wanted to admit. I felt invisible in rooms full of people who knew my name. Needed, but not missed. Valued, but not prioritized. Eventually, something in me shifted. I didn't become bitter. I didn't cut people off. I didn't turn cold. I just stopped putting myself last. I realized that if I kept giving without being chosen, I would eventually disappear, not from their lives, but from my own. So I started doing something that felt strange at first. I began treating myself the way I always treated others. I started listening to my own needs instead of dismissing them. I stopped over-explaining when I needed rest or distance. I stopped rearranging my life for people who never rearranged theirs for me. That doesn't mean I stopped being a good friend. I still show up the way I believe friends should. I still care deeply. I still give when it's right. But now, I give to myself first. I make sure my energy isn't drained before it's even offered. I check in with myself the way I used to check in with everyone else. I protect my time, my peace, my growth. Because if I'm not someone's priority, fine. At least now, I'm mine. And honestly, that's the first time in my life it's felt balanced. Sometimes the realization that you're not a priority isn't a rejection. It's an invitation. An invitation to stop earning a place in other people's lives and start building one in your own. We've been together a little over a year now. And for most of that time, I honestly thought everything was solid. But lately, I've started to understand something I didn't want to admit before. I'm not a priority to her, at least not in the way I thought I was. It's not that she treats me badly. That's what makes this so confusing. When it's just the two of us, everything feels right. She gives me her full attention. Her phone stays face down. We plan dates, cook together, go to the gym, even started a little book club just for us. In those moments, I feel close to her. Needed. Chosen. But the moment other people enter the picture, it's like that connection quietly disappears. Her friends almost always come first. Girls' nights, hangouts, plans that pop up last minute. Those are the things that get priority. I usually don't say anything, because I respect her independence. I've always believed that a relationship should fit into a life, not replace it. Still, there was a moment recently that hit harder than I expected. She had been away on vacation, and we hadn't seen each other for weeks. We planned to talk over video once she landed. I even reminded her that I work East Coast hours, so my time in the evening was limited. I wake up early. She landed, and instead of heading home or calling me, she detoured to go see her friend's new dog. I found out later. I waited. Eventually, it got too late. I went to bed without talking to her at all. That might sound small, but it wasn't the first time something like that happened. I've noticed that I'm often the last to hear about important things in her life. New plans, changes, decisions. Not because she hides them, just because telling me doesn't seem urgent. What really messed with my head is how different things are depending on the setting. When we're alone, she's affectionate, engaged, warm. When we're around others, especially her friends, she pulls back. No hand-holding, no closeness. Like affection is something she only allows in private. She lives with a roommate and dogs, so even when I'm at her place, tenderness feels limited. It's like there's always something or someone else that needs her attention first. And then there was that comment. This past weekend, her friend's boyfriend casually mentioned something that completely caught me off guard. He said that in the beginning, her friends actually encouraged her to stay with me because she didn't want a relationship at all back then. He meant it kindly. He even said he was glad she stayed. But it hit me harder than I expected. We've been together for over a year. We've talked about potentially moving in together next year. And suddenly, I couldn't stop thinking about that sentence, that I was something she had to be convinced to try. Since then, all these feelings I didn't know I was carrying surfaced at once. I started noticing how often I adjust my expectations to fit her life. How rarely she adjusts hers to fit mine. How I feel deeply valued in private, but strangely optional in public. I don't want to be controlling. I don't want to take away her independence or her friendships. I never wanted to be her whole world. But I also don't want to feel like I come second, or third, or fourth. What scares me most is that from her perspective, nothing is wrong. I've never raised this before. I've always been the understanding one, the flexible one, the one who gets it. So if I bring it up now, it might feel sudden to her, like it came out of nowhere. But to me, it's been building quietly. I don't want to shock her. I don't want to accuse her. I just don't want to keep feeling like I'm important only when it's convenient. Because something has changed. And I'm at a point where I know this. I can respect her independence and still need to feel like I matter. I just haven't figured out yet how to say that, without losing her, or myself, in the process. I didn't realize it in the middle of a canceled plan or a missed call. I realized it while sitting in a hospital hallway. It wasn't my emergency, it was my mother's. Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough that I'd spent the night there, running on coffee and adrenaline. By morning, I felt hollowed out. I texted her, not with drama, not with panic, just a simple message saying I was exhausted, scared, and could really use her voice. She replied hours later, not to ask what happened, not to ask if my mom was okay, just a casual message about her day being chaotic and her needing to mentally unplug. I stared at that message for a long time. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't angry, just stunned. Because for the first time, I wasn't asking for attention or time or reassurance about us. I was asking for support in a moment when life felt heavy. And she opted out. In the days that followed, things went back to normal, or at least what passed for normal between us. Light conversations, shared jokes, weekend plans penciled in loosely. But something inside me had shifted. I started watching the relationship more closely, not obsessively, but honestly. I noticed that when she needed comfort, I was there instantly. When she had a bad day at work, I listened for hours. When she felt overwhelmed, I made space. When I needed the same thing, I was met with delay, distance, or distraction. There was always a reason. She was tired. She needed space. She had plans. She didn't have the emotional bandwidth that day. And every reason sounded reasonable, until I realized they all added up to the same result. I was alone when it mattered. The realization didn't make me hate her. It made me quieter. I stopped reaching out during hard moments. I started telling friends instead. I learned how to self-soothe. I handled my life the way I always had, independently. Except now I was doing it while technically being in a relationship. That's when I understood something painful and precise. I wasn't her safe place. I wasn't her anchor. I wasn't where she went when things got real. I was the person she enjoyed when life was light. I remember one night in particular. She called me, upset about something small, a conflict with a friend, a stressful decision she had to make. I listened. I reassured her. I did what I always did. At one point, she thanked me and said, "You're really good to talk to." And I smiled and felt absolutely empty because I realized I had become a resource, not a priority. Someone she accessed when it benefited her, not someone she protected or showed up for in return. I didn't confront her right away, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to be honest with myself first. I asked myself, if this relationship stays exactly as it is, Will I feel supported in 5 years? Will I feel chosen or merely included? The answer came quickly. So when I finally did talk to her, it wasn't emotional or dramatic. I didn't accuse. I didn't beg. I explained what I'd been feeling and gave examples, not to prove a point, but to be understood. She listened, and then she said she hadn't realized she'd been doing that she cared, that she didn't mean to make me feel that way. I believe she meant it. But caring without showing up is still absence. In the end, the relationship didn't survive, not because of one moment, but because of a pattern. What I learned from that experience stayed with me. Being independent doesn't mean you don't need support. Loving someone doesn't mean you accept emotional neglect. And being strong doesn't mean you should be alone when you don't have to be. The moment you realize you're not a priority is often the moment you stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing yourself instead. Not angrily, not dramatically, just honestly. I realized it on a day that was supposed to be important to both of us, but ended up mattering only to me. It was something I'd been working toward for months. A big step in my career. Not flashy, not something you post about for likes, but meaningful to me. I talked to her about it so many times that I assumed she knew how much it mattered. She'd listened, nodded, said she was proud. The day finally came. I told her in advance. Not in a dramatic way. Just that I'd really like to see her afterward, or at least talk properly. I didn't need a celebration. I just wanted to share the moment with the person I was with. That morning, she wished me luck. Sweet message. Heart emoji. Everything felt normal. By the afternoon, I hadn't heard from her. I checked in after everything was over, feeling relieved, nervous, excited all at once. I sent a message saying it went well and that I was free now. Her reply came an hour later. She told me she was already out. Some spontaneous plan with friends. Nothing urgent. Nothing special. Just something else she chose to do. She added, "We can talk later." Later never really came. That night, I watched her stories, laughing, drinks on the table, music playing. Completely present where she was. Fully engaged. Living her life. Meanwhile, I was sitting alone with this huge moment. One I'd imagined sharing, slowly deflating. I didn't say anything that night. I told myself I was being dramatic. That adults don't need constant validation. That she didn't owe me her time. But once you start thinking like that, it's hard to stop. I began replaying other moments. Times I rearranged my schedule to be available for her. Times I showed up tired, stressed, drained, because she needed me. Times I listened closely, remembered details, followed up days later to check how things turned out. And then I compared them to moments like this. Not malicious. Not cruel. Just absent. I realized that when something mattered to her, it mattered to both of us. When something mattered to me, it was optional. Over the next few weeks, I tested nothing. I said nothing. I just observed. I noticed how often I was the one waiting. How often I was the one adapting. How rarely she adjusted anything for me. She wasn't doing it on purpose. That's the uncomfortable truth. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She simply moved through her life assuming I'd still be there. Flexible, understanding, low friction. And I had trained her to expect that. The final confirmation came during a conversation we had later. She was talking about plans for the next few months, trips, events, things she was excited about. I listened. I smiled. I asked questions. At no point did she ask where I fit into any of it. Not once. And that's when it clicked. I wasn't part of her future planning. I was part of her present convenience. I didn't explode. I didn't confront her in that moment. I didn't want to fight. I wanted clarity. So later, when I brought it up, I didn't talk about that one day. I talked about the pattern. About how I felt supported emotionally, but not considered. How I felt close in private, but secondary in practice. She was surprised. Not defensive, just surprised. And that hurt more than anger would have. Because it meant she genuinely hadn't noticed my absence in the places where it mattered most. We didn't break up that day, but something shifted permanently. I stopped centering my life around someone who didn't see me as central. I stopped treating her availability as a reward. I stopped minimizing my needs to stay easy to be with. Eventually, the relationship faded, not with a bang, but with understanding. What stayed with me was this lesson. Being loved doesn't automatically mean being prioritized. Being valued doesn't always mean being considered. And if you constantly have to downplay your milestones, your needs, your moments, you're paying a quiet price to stay connected. The moment you realize you're not a priority is rarely dramatic. It's often the day something big happens, and you're the only one who shows up for it.